In the summer of 2016, two lifelong friends set out to hike the rugged trails of Montana's Bitterroot Mountains. They never came home for 5 agonizing years. Their families searched for answers. The woods yielded nothing: no backpacks, no shoes. Not even a broken branch that could prove where they had gone. But in 2021, a group of hikers stumbled into a shadowy cave system, and inside, they discovered something that would finally crack the mystery wide open. This is the story of how two young men vanished into the wilderness, and how a single clue, buried in the dark, changed everything. They were two friends. Ethan Cole and Maya Brennan. Same street since 2nd grade. Same bus stop, same jokes, same promise every June, one big hike before the world pulled them in different directions. Ethan was the map and compass kid. Quiet, steady, the one who carried extra water and checked the weather twice. His dad turned wrenches at the only garage in town. His mom ran a thrift store that smelled like cedar and old paperbacks. In the fall, Ethan had a dorm assignment at a forestry program in Idaho. He liked trees because they didn't pretend to be anything else. Maya was the camera: loud when she was happy, louder when she was scared. She lived with her aunt, a night shift nurse who kept coffee in the freezer and money in an envelope taped under the sink. In August she was headed to Missoula for design classes. She took pictures of things people overlooked: rust on a hinge, a moth on a window screen, the way pine needles made shadows like stitches. They weren't a couple, they had tried that once and laughed about how bad they were at it. This worked better. Two kids who trusted each other more than anyone there. One big hike was a ritual. Every summer they picked a trail a little farther, a little wilder. They kept a shoebox with the stubs from backcountry permits and a handful of iron-on patches from fire lookouts they'd reached. In 2016, the Bitterroot Mountains felt like a good goodbye. Granite spires. Cold rivers. Trails that switch back into sky. They picked a Sunday on purpose. Fewer people. Less dust on the road to the trailhead. They packed light but not careless. Ethan's pack had a printed topo map inside a gallon zip bag, a cheap compass, a headlamp with new batteries, a space blanket, and a roll of athletic tape that fixed more problems than it should. Maya packed a rain shell the color of tomatoes, extra socks, a peanut butter jar full of trail mix, and a disposable camera she'd bought on a dare that turned into a tradition: one roll of reel film. Each summer at 6:40 a.m., grainy gas station security footage caught them pushing through the glass door of the Sinclair on Highway 93. 2 coffees. 2 breakfast burritos. A third burrito they swore they didn't need but bought anyway. The cashier, who knew everyone, rang them up and told them the forecast looked clean. "Watch the creek," he said anyway. Snowmelt's still high. They stopped at the ranger board where the trail leaves the gravel. Someone had pinned a paper about recent bear activity. Someone else had scribbled, "Take your trash out," on the corner. A newer laminated sheet showed a washout on a spur road. The date in the bottom right was months old. Ethan traced the route on the map with his finger. "Main trail up. Quick out and back to the lookout if we've got legs," he said. Maya took a picture of his finger on the contour lines. She always liked starting at the map. They signed the log in the little metal box. Names, time, planned route. The pencil lead smudged under Maya's wrist. 2 quick texts went out at 7:18 a.m. "On trail. Back for dinner. Ethan, signal bad but we're good. Love you." Maya. The signal bars dropped to 1, then none. They tucked their phones into airplane mode to save batteries. It felt good to let the world fall behind the trees. The trail climbed through lodgepole and then opened into a meadow cut by a creek that was too bright to look at straight on. Sun hammered the rocks. The sound of water stitched the silence together. Maya walked ahead when she could, then fell back and shot Ethan's boots stepping from stone to stone. "Hold still," she said, then laughed. "No, keep moving." She liked blur. It proved life. A fisherman waited below the bridge at the first crossing. He wore a hat with a fly stuck in the brim and the unfriendly look of someone in the middle of his favorite thing. They waved anyway. He lifted 2 fingers. He would tell deputies later that the girl asked if the water got any deeper. He told them it did. At 1:14, they reached a bend where the cliff face shouldered into the trail. The rock was pale and sun-hot. A black seam ran across it, like a smile that didn't reach the eyes. Maya stood back and aimed the camera. "Look," she said. "The mountain has a mouth." Ethan squinted. "A cleft, not wide, gone in shadow by afternoon." "Old mine," he said. "Or just a crack?" They stared longer than they meant to. Shade felt like a promise when the heat got inside your bones. They took a selfie because you always do when you don't know you're about to need it. Faces tight in the frame, shoulders pressed together, the red jacket bright as a flag, the line of dark rock behind them like a bruise on the mountain. Maya posted it later when the film got developed in someone else's hands. Not yet. For now, the tiny rectangle of plastic and chemistry clicked and wound and went back into the bandana wrap in her pack at 1:42. One more text found a heartbeat of service and slipped through the trees, taking the long loop. "Don't panic. It's gorgeous." Ethan, that line kept two mothers breathing for 5 years. The long loop wasn't on the map in any official way. It was how people in town referred to the extra horseshoe of trail to an old fire lookout that only showed up on older prints. Parts of it had been rerouted after a slide. The new route climbed safer and slower. The old route cut across talus and hugged the cliffs. You could still see it if you knew where to look, boot tracks thinner, stones polished by fewer feet. At the junction, there was a post with nothing on it. A sign had fallen or been taken. Two faint paths split the dust. The one to the right was obvious, cut wide by summer crowds on legs and dogs on leashes. The one to the left slid into brush and rock like a decision you don't admit out loud. Maya tilted her head. "Left looks quicker," she said. Ethan looked at the contour lines again. "Left looked steeper, too." 10 minutes, he said. "We look, we don't commit." Thunderheads were building where the blue used to be. The air took on that metallic dimness it gets before a storm, like you're breathing a coin. They went left, the tread narrowed and the rock got loose. Larkspur brushed their shins. The cliff to their right gathered itself into bigger pieces. Every footstep made a sound that felt loud. A faint wind skimmed the wall and disappeared into the seam that looked like a mouth. Closer, the shadow inside wasn't uniform. Closer, you could smell wet stone. Maya reached out and touched the rock with 2 fingers, then wiped the dust on her shorts like she'd touched something alive. 10 minutes, she said, and grinned like she always did before she did something that scared her a little. 10, Ethan said. Then we turn. Somewhere to the north, a dull crack of thunder answered a question they hadn't asked yet. They stepped off the safer dirt and onto flirtatious stone. The world drew in. Wind went quiet. The bright outside dulled to a softer, greener light that came from everywhere and nowhere. The seam in the rock widened just enough for a person to slip sideways. The first breath inside was colder than it should have been in August. Back on the main trail, a family of 4 with trekking poles and a golden retriever took a picture at the cliff bend and moved on, never knowing 2 kids had gone ghost just out of frame at 2:06. A squirrel chattered at an empty switchback. At 2:19, the fisherman reeled in nothing and blamed the sky. At 2:31, a cloud slid across the sun and the meadow below went the color of tin. By evening, the aunt's phone would buzz, then stop. By dark, both houses would have porch lights burning. By midnight, the county would know, but right now, it was still early afternoon, and the mountain was holding its breath inside that cool dim. Maya lifted the camera again. "One last picture," she said. The flash popped. Light hit stone and bounced back hard. For a second, the scene looked like the edge of a room. The picture would matter later. For now, it was just proof the light had reached them. And then the first drop of rain found the rock, and then another. When the storm rolled over the ridge, it tore the radio chatter into static and turned the gullies into throats. On the log by the permit box, their names sat in pencil. The graphite shone when it caught the right angle. A ranger locked the lot for the night and wrote down 3 plates on a clipboard. No one saw Ethan and Maya come back through the trees. No one saw them at all. The next footprints on that faint left-hand path belonged to the people who came looking. By 8:45 p.m., both houses in town were lit like beacons. Porch lights on, curtains open, phones clutched in hands that dialed and redialed. Ethan's mom called Maya's aunt. Maya's aunt called the sheriff's line. The dispatcher logged 2 overdue hikers and said, could just be a flat tire. That's how it always started. But midnight came. And the Subaru Ethan drove was still sitting at the trailhead. The sheriff's deputy who did the 1 a.m. check wrote it in his report, "Vehicle secure, no one visible." He tapped the hood, shined his light across the empty trail sign, and told himself they'd hiked out on the other side with a ride from friends. He didn't call it in as urgent. Not yet. By dawn, when their phones still went straight to voicemail, it became urgent. Search and rescue was mobilized by 6:30 a.m. Volunteers signed in at a folding table. Maps were spread across truck hoods. Highlighters marked squares of wilderness like a patchwork quilt. The dogs came first, lean shepherds with neon harnesses, noses down, handlers holding long leads like fishing lines. Helicopters came second, low and loud, their rotors flattening meadows of lupin. By 10 a.m., the search was official. By noon, it was already desperate. The weather turned. That storm from yesterday hadn't been small. It broke across the ridge like a pitcher of water poured onto stone. Creeks swelled. Mud tracked over boot prints. Any scent the dogs might have caught bled out into rain. At the trailhead sign-in box, their names were the last ones on the page. Penciled at 7:18 a.m. 2 words, long loop. That note became a curse. The long loop wasn't on any current maps. Some rangers didn't even know it still existed. The searchers argued whether to spread wide or funnel in. They lost hours debating. Day 1 found nothing. Day 2 found nothing. On day 3, a volunteer team reached the saddle, spread into a fan, and cut across the talus. They stopped at the rock seam, the one that looked like a mouth. One of them stepped closer, shined his headlamp in. Just wet stone, narrowing into dark. He called out once, his own voice came back at him. He shrugged, wrote it in his notebook, checked cave, empty. The file would later show that note. The line underlined once. No follow-up. By the end of week 1, the county downgraded the operation. Helicopters stopped. The big grid maps were rolled back up. The volunteers went home. The last official update said, no sign of Ethan Cole or Maya Brennan. Presumed lost to terrain. But terrain doesn't take wallets. Or jackets. Or cameras. Terrain doesn't take kids like that. Still, the mountain stayed quiet. And 2 families stared at empty bedrooms that hadn't been touched. The shoebox with their permits sat under Ethan's bed. Maya's aunt couldn't bring herself to open it. 5 years would pass before someone finally did. Time has a way of turning panic into ritual. Flyers fade on telephone poles. Reward money stops being updated. Search Facebook groups shrink to a handful of names that post any news once a month. For Ethan's mom, it was his boots by the back door. She polished them twice a year like he might come back to wear them. For Maya's aunt, it was the red jacket. She washed it once a month even though it never came home. She said it was so the smell wouldn't go stale. Birthdays were the worst. You can blow out candles for one missing kid. But when it's 2, the silence feels like math you can't solve. And still, there were moments. Hikers swore they saw movement. A shadow crossing a high ridge. Campers reported hearing laughter at night. Once, a trail runner found a strip of film curled in the dirt. It turned out to be from a hunter's trail cam, nothing more. But for 3 days, it was treated like holy evidence. Sheriff's deputies got tired of the calls. They stopped answering with urgency. It was just another cold case. But the families didn't stop. They kept writing letters to the Forest Service. They kept asking about that long loop. They kept asking about the cave. And 5 years later, another hiker with a different kind of eye would stumble where the rest had passed by. It was July, 2021. The sun was punishing that afternoon. A group of weekend hikers cut off trail to chase shade. They found themselves at the same cliff bend, the same rock seam. One of them, a teacher from Missoula, ducked inside with his phone flashlight. The beam caught something that shouldn't have been there. Not bones. Not clothes. Something smaller. Plastic. A rectangle, dulled by dust, wedged in a cracked chest high. He pulled it out. A disposable camera. Red tape on the side. The same kind Maya had carried. He turned it over in his hand. It was water damaged but intact. The hikers carried it down the trail like it was a live coal. At the sheriff's office, technicians cracked it open. The film inside was ruined in spots, but not all. A dozen frames survived. The photos showed mountains, meadows, Ethan in profile, Maya laughing, Ethan holding out the topo map like a flag. The last 3 frames were different. The cave mouth from inside. A flash-burned shot of dripping stone. Maya's face, half-lit, wide-eyed, as if surprised by the camera firing. And the last frame, a blur of motion, Ethan's hand in the corner, a shadow behind him that didn't match the rock. The sheriff's report called it inconclusive. The families called it proof. Proof they hadn't just walked off into the woods. Proof something else had happened. The file reopened. Reporters circled back. Search teams were sent again. The mountain gave nothing more. But that camera meant one thing. They had made it inside. And something had been with them. The sheriff's office didn't want it. Not after 5 years of silence. But the disposable camera forced their hand. It was logged as recovered evidence item number 4217, cave area, long loop trail. Technicians did their best with the film, enlarging, enhancing, but it only made the last frame worse. The blur became a smear. The shadow became a suggestion. Some swore it looked like a figure. Others said it was just rock. But one thing was undeniable, Ethan and Maya hadn't vanished on the open trail. They had gone into the cave. Searchers went back, this time with ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, even drones to map the narrow cracks. For 3 days, they probed. For 3 days, the mountain stayed silent. And yet, rumors spread. The search logs leaked. Locals read the line about the shadow behind subject. They whispered it in diners, in gas stations, online. Theories bloomed like wildfire. It was a drifter hiding in the woods. They stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to see, smugglers, maybe. The cave system goes deeper. They fell, and no one's found the second chamber. But the most chilling theory was the simplest. Someone had been with them. The families pushed hard. They held press conferences, demanded federal involvement. The FBI sent one agent for 2 weeks. His report said, no conclusive evidence of foul play. And just like that, the case cooled again. But for the people of Montana, it was no longer just a cold case. It was a ghost story. After the cave discovery, the town split in 2. One side believed it was nature. The cave went deeper, a collapse sealed it, and Ethan and Maya were gone forever under stone. The other side believed it was human. Hunters reported strange vehicles on the service roads near the trail in 2016, the same week Ethan and Maya disappeared. Unmarked, with heavy tires, parked where they shouldn't be. The sheriff dismissed it at the time. Now, it came back with a vengeance. Others swore the cave wasn't just a cave. They claimed there were old mining tunnels out there, sealed off by the Forest Service. Maps from the 1930s hinted at shafts no one had surveyed in decades. If Ethan and Maya had stumbled onto one, who else might have been inside? Theories spun into legend. Campfire stories about lights in the forest, echoes in the cave, voices where no one should be. But for the families, it wasn't legend. It was absence. Bedrooms still untouched. 2 sets of parents who hadn't moved away because, what if they come back? And then, year 6, something surfaced. Literally. Spring runoff in Montana can turn trickles into torrents. That year, a late thaw swelled every creek. Kayakers cutting down the Little Bear River spotted something lodged against a logjam. At first, they thought it was trash. Then one of them saw fabric. Red. When deputies hauled it out, it was a jacket. Torn, waterlogged, but still recognizable. Maya's jacket. The same one her aunt had washed every month, praying it would come home. The label was faded, but her initials, MB, were still inked on the inside seam. Forensics said it had been in water a significant time. But no body. No bones. Just cloth. The jacket reignited everything. The cave. The camera. The theories. How did a jacket end up miles from where the camera was found? The river didn't run through the cave system. Which meant something, or someone, moved it. And if the jacket moved, what else could have?